And I said, there's 21 nations left to go. If you do that, there's no training organization in the history of the world that has trained inside the borders of every country of the world. And if you hire me, we're going to get that done. He said, Rob, I don't think it can be done because there's some really hard, how are you going to do that inside the borders of North Korea and Somalia and some places like that? And I don't know what happened. Something came over me. I looked him in the eyes and I said, Don, if you hire me, we will either reach every nation of the world, or when they find my body, it will be pointed in that direction.
This is the L3 Leadership Podcast, episode number 195.
This is the L3 Leadership Podcast. And now here is your host, Doug Smith.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host. I hope you're doing well. In today's interview, you'll hear my interview with Rob McCleland. If you're unfamiliar with Rob, he has quite the leadership resume. He's currently the CEO of Leader Tribe. He's the Director of Leadership Development at Victory World Church in Atlanta, Georgia. He's also the past president of the John Maxwell Leadership Foundation, and so much more. And in the interview, I love this. Rob shares a story about how he convinced John Maxwell to hire him to reach every nation through his nonprofit, Equip, and how Rob was able to accomplish that in just 3 years. In fact, here's what John Maxwell has said about Rob. He said, "Our goal was to reach every nation in the world, and when we handed the ball to Rob, he took us over the goal line." I love that. Not only we hear that story, we also talk about leadership development, overcoming personal issues. We take Rob through the lightning round and so much more. So you're going to love this interview. But before we dive in, just a few announcements. I want to encourage each of you to become a member of L3 Leadership. And I'll just say this, that if you've ever wanted your life and leadership to go to the next level, if you've ever desired to be surrounded with a community of leaders that will encourage you, challenge you, hold you accountable, help you reach your potential, and cause you to make a bigger impact, then you need to become a member of L3 Leadership. When you become a member, you'll have the ability to join one of our mastermind groups. You'll have access to our community of over 125 leaders, access to the tools and resources you need to take your life and leadership to the next level, and so much more. So stop doing life alone as a leader and join a community of leaders that will help you thrive. To learn more about membership, go to l3leadership.org/membership. I also want to thank our sponsor, Alex Toulandon. Alex is a full-time realtor with Keller Williams Realty, and if you're looking to buy or sell a house in the Pittsburgh market, Alex is your guy. He's a member and a supporter of L3 Leadership and would love the opportunity to connect with you. You can find out more at pittsburghpropertyshowcase.com. With that being said, let's dive right into the interview with Rob. Enjoy it, and I will be back at the end with a few announcements. So, hey, Rob, thank you so much for being willing to do this interview. And why don't we just start off with you telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Appreciate it so much. Great to be with you and your listeners. I'm so thankful as well. I recently started a podcast, and so the opportunity that we have to serve the greater public and help people out there any way I can do that, count me in. So my name's Rob. I grew up in a small town in Oroville, California. Really rough childhood, even though I didn't realize it at the time. So my mom was married and divorced 4 times by the time I was in 6th grade. Kind of rough, different guy in the house every night when the bars closed. But I didn't think I had a terrible childhood. That was the only one I knew. That was just that's how life was for me and the people who lived on that side of town. Looking back, I did have some issues in life that came from that later I had to deal with and work through and get some good counseling on. Having said that, I always grew up fairly positive person. And when I look back now, one of the things I'm most thankful for is I had some athletic ability and I always had good coaches in my life. So I was one of those guys that during each of the seasons, football season, then on to basketball season, then finally in the summer baseball season, I was always on a team somewhere. So I had these coaches that were kicking my rear for me. And I had some really good, strong male influence in my life and a good peer group to hang out with. A long time after that, I learned a term called prevenient grace. And that's kind of grace in your life, keeping you from ruining your life when you could have or should have. And I saw a lot of other people who were sort of in those same scenarios who didn't come out of it with the same degree of health today. So as a result of that, in my background, I've been this kind of kid who just wanted to be an overcomer, who part of that was bad. I always felt like I had to prove myself. So I was full of myself and a prideful little so-and-so. Having said that, later going through some brokenness, but always having this this hope to achieve and to not necessarily be successful, but to overcome whatever it was in my life that was holding me back. That has served me well through the rest of life. So eventually got a college degree, met and married the most incredible woman in the history of the world. She is unbelievable. If you go on my Facebook page and you see her, you'll say, no, she's not older than him. She's a little bit older than me, but she is awesome. And so we've journeyed together 32 years now. Went on, had some opportunities to work in some local church settings with some outstanding leaders. Guys like the CEO of JCPenney was on the board in one of the churches I was in. And those guys took me under their wings and encouraged me to go to grad school, actually helped pay for grad school. So I went on, did a master's, really fell in love with learning, and ended up with a PhD in organizational leadership. And so for the last 2 decades, I've been running companies, both on the for-profit, nonprofit side, and serving people wherever I can. So I'm a full-on leadership geek, and that's why I started the Leader Tribe podcast.
Yeah, and in hearing your story, I just want to dive a little bit deeper. So you talked about you've always had this internal drive. So maybe, and you were fortunate enough to have good mentors around, but you said that your childhood was all that you knew. But eventually, looking back, you realized that left some huge holes and deficits in your life. Now, I know you have a passion for fatherless kids, but I'm just curious, how did you start to recognize and deal with those deficits? Because a lot of people have them. One, they never become self-aware about them. And 2, they don't know how to deal with them. So I'm just curious, how did you become healthy as a leader and start to deal with those things?
As far as becoming healthy as a leader, I'm going to say the jury's still out on that. You'd have to talk to my wife. However,
that's fair.
I did ask the question, why am I like this a lot of times? And as a result of asking questions like that, I was willing to explore some of the parts on the inside. For example, real quick example, I always wanted to hang around with the most popular kids in the school. But I mean, if you're a super poor kid and people in that school know where you come from and sort of what's holding you back, because they knew of my family situation and who my mom was in that little town, I always felt like I had this chip on my shoulder. I wasn't angry, but I always wanted to overcome that and to try to prove myself. Well, what that led to is in all these different scenarios, trying to prove myself that I'm the best, or I'm worthy of love, or that I'm worth. And you have enough people who are saying, dude, what is it with you? Why are you always trying to prove yourself or show yourself being that great? Well, since I hadn't really received love and unconditional love or caring, at that point in my life, I thought, well, I guess you have to earn it. And so I'll go out and try to do that. And it was through some of those hard lessons and some faithful people around me who could, especially, I became a person of faith to find out someone like me could actually be loved and forgiven. I just thought, truly, I thought that's too good to be true. That couldn't be true. And that really, I think, was the biggest healing, and it's been a good journey from there. A couple of really good books along the way as well. One of them that I'll think of in just a moment, it's the one that everyone on staff who went on staff with Crew had to read back in the day. Billy Graham does the foreword on it, and my friend Richard Ryerson's doing a mastermind on it. But it has to do with having to prove yourself. And so I'll come up with that title. Just finding out that I don't have to prove myself. I just get to serve people and love people and do all I can.
Yeah, no, that's actually a perfect segue into what I want to talk about. On our pre-call, we were talking about your time that you spent at Equip, which is one of John Maxwell's organizations. And I thought it was so interesting. I want you to share the story that you shared with me about the interview that you had with him that essentially got you the job. Because you talked about earning yourself, and it seems like you've overcome that, but there's a confidence about you now and who you are as a leader and what you bring to the table. And so can you share that story with people? And then I have a few follow-up questions to this story.
Yeah, I'd love to. I led an incredible organization out in California where we had churches and hospitals and schools on 5 continents. And as a result of that, I had the privilege of making sure that we were doing leadership development in those places. And so I looked around and I found the most easy to understand and work with leadership material that was out there was John Maxwell's. So there was some that was more academic. There was some that was more in detail. But as far as working with the average person in these different context, John's stuff was the best way. I got fully in. I went down. I met with the Equip team. I looked at theirs and I said, hey, I'd like to begin using your resources, and I'd like to do a pilot project and actually buy the rights to them. And so we had some 2 or 3 conversations going back and forth. And as a result of that, I kind of became friends with the team. Well, one thing I did is I took their resources and I tried a pilot project that worked really well, and I sent them the results. Now, fast forward 2 or 3 years later, their president at the time was a guy named John Hull. He was stepping down, and so they needed to look for a new president. Well, John and Mark Cole, who's a dear friend who you've had on this podcast, they began saying, okay, in the future, do we want to just keep going the same direction, or do we want to change some of the ways that we're doing things? Then I thought, you know what, we do want to change it a little bit. And as a result of that, one of the things that they really wanted to change was they wanted to have more people involved, not just when the trainers were there, but making sure that they had some accountability back and forth during the time between the different trainings in Equip. Okay, so I had done that pilot project, sent them the results. All of a sudden, they're going to make that change. And one of their senior vice presidents, a guy named Doug Carter, said, well, hey, there's a guy named Rob who did that, and we have the results. They looked at the results, and John Maxwell said, hey, I want to talk to this guy. And so we started talking back and forth, and all of a sudden, he decided he wanted to interview me to become the next executive director of Equip. Okay, that was way too long, and I apologize to everybody. But now we're at the table. We're at Pebble Beach. Sitting straight across from me is John Maxwell. To my left is Mark Cole. To my right is Tom Mullins. And so phenomenal leaders all. And so I'm sitting there just repping it, baby, bringing it, and scared to death, heart beating out of my chest. But I was just thankful to be at the table. It was a lot of fun. And John started talking. I said, hey, John, before we really get into it, if you're not committed to reaching every nation of the world, then I'm probably not going to be your guy. This isn't going to be a good fit. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, as you know, you have reached a lot of nations. You've actually reached 175. There's only 196 in the world. You're 21 nations short. But 2 or 3 years ago, you were 21 nations short. And the year before that, 21 nations short. Here's what you don't know. Every time the former president, John Hull, has come through town, I took him out to a steak dinner and we talked, and I said, what's the hardest nation left? Give it to me. We'll help go reach it for you. It's got to be some stand country, right? Where they'll kill you if they find out about you. But they've got computers there, and we know people at Microsoft, and they can get us in as Microsoft employees. And so give us the hardest one. Let's do this. And I kept kind of what I would call getting the Heisman. You know how the Heisman has his arms stuck out to defend himself? Hull keeps giving me the Heisman, kind of going, no, we got this. And so I'm looking at John, telling him this story. And I said, there's 21 nations left to go. If you do that, there's no training organization in the history of the world that has trained inside the borders of every country of the world. And if you hire me, we're going to get that done. He said, Rob, I don't think it can be done because there's some really hard. How are you going to do that inside the borders of North Korea and Somalia and some places like that? And I don't know what happened. Something came over me. I looked him in the eyes and I said, John, if you hire me, we will either reach every nation of the world, or when they find my body, it will be pointed in that direction. And I can't even believe these words are coming out of my mouth. John leans back and he kind of laughs. And he kind of looks over at Mark Cole, and Mark's kind of shrugging, and looks over at Tom Sevens, and Coach is kind of shrugging. He looks back at me and says, okay, you're hired. Let's do this. Can you get it done in 3 years? And I'm going like, wait, it took you 17 years to get this done. Just those. These are the hardest ones. 3 years? Are you kidding me? And so I looked him right in the eye and said, yes, sir, we'll get it done. And I'm panicking on the inside saying, what have I done? Well, here's the great part. I walked out from that breakfast, and we were at the Inn at Spanish Bay, long hallway, walked down, got in the elevator. Nobody else is in the elevator. The doors closed. And I did this coolest happy dance of all time. I don't know if there were, cameras in that elevator, but I'm going like, yeah, who brought it? That's right. I'm just having so much fun because I was scared to death. I had prayed and prayed and prayed, trusted God for strength. My wife was praying, and I overcame that fear and had an unbelievable, outstanding run with John. What a privilege to serve somebody like him and to serve in one of his organizations. And that thing that we had to get done in 3 years, we got it done in 18 months. And came up with a new strategy that was super effective. And by God's grace, we invited all the board, everybody. The last nation that we did, I had been saving this one little nation called Kiribati. It's way down in the South Pacific. We could have got there anytime. It wasn't dangerous at all. But I saved that because I knew we'd never get the board to go to Somalia, right? So what we did is we saved that, and then we had this huge celebration. We invited everyone, took about 60 people, and we went to Fiji and brought the island people from Kiribati over, did the training there, and celebrated the first organization to train inside the borders of every country of the world. It was a great day.
Can you talk to senior leaders or maybe leaders that are listening to this that are visionaries that want to attract a Rob, right? I'm sure people listening to this, that was a home run hire for the John Maxwell team. And what is it about John, and what would your advice be to visionary leaders to attract quality talent such as yourself to carry out the vision that God or the vision of the organization, but that God put in their heart?
Yeah, great question. And it's really bifurcated right down the middle. And so I hope the executive leaders listening to this will get this in their hearts. Everybody says, hey, I want to get a great leader for my organization. And they should. I mean, you think of any area of your organization, your team that's going pretty well right now, you'd say, I have a great leader in that area. Any area that's going poorly, you'd say, hey, I need to find somebody to lead that area. So we all want good, strong leaders. But what happens is they want to go get somebody who's a great, strong leader, and then they want to come in and then they micromanage them or tell them what to do. And so you have to decide in your heart, if you're an executive leader, do you want somebody who is going to do what you tell them to do? Or do you want to get somebody in there that's so good you can empower them and they'll actually challenge you back? They're not going to usurp your authority. They're not going to go off the rails or anything like that. They'll be under the authority that they're placed under. But are you willing to turn them loose and let them come up with things to do and areas to do it in that you would have never thought of? So are you going to tell them what to do? Or are you going to say, I really, after a 3 or 6 month time, making sure that we've got the same core values, we understand the same things, I'm really empowering this person to get it done. And either one of those are the right answer. Now, we might be sitting here going, well, you have to empower them. Otherwise, no, that's not if you have the type of personality that ultimately you have to have some control, then just let them know that, because there are a ton of awesome leaders out there who are just saying, man, if I could just have somebody and they would tell me what to do, I would get it done for them. And they love doing that, and they need that kind of. And then there's other people like, dude, if you micromanage me one more time, I'm going to kill you. And so ensuring that you understand what you're really looking for and then going and finding the best person you can in that. Now, I will give you one other little hint for those executive leaders who are listening. The type who's sort of the empowering, you're going to find somebody, they're probably going to be a type A personality. Those types of people, they love rewards. And so figuring out even early on, saying, hey, here's what we want to do. We want to blow this up. I want to treat you like a partner as much as an employee. And let's figure out how you can benefit from this as well. Those are the usually type A personalities. That's going to go a long way, at least the ones I hire. I notice that that's more important to them. And so it's really a benefit knowing that type of thing going into the beginning of the relationship.
And it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, so when we were talking about the story, it sounds like once you completed that mission, you knew about yourself that you have to be a part of something that's like, hey, here's my mission, I'm going to complete it, and then you have to move on to another mission. Is that true? And if so, how can people keep engaged, or what advice do you have to senior leaders when it comes to letting a Rob go, so to speak, to their next season once it's complete?
Yeah, super question. I wasn't like that as a result of that experience or from working with John. I was like that previously. My wife and I went and moved to Washington, D.C. and started a university in Washington, D.C. only because people said it could never be done. And it's like, I'm sorry, did you say God couldn't do something? That's how I hear those things. And so to me, I don't want to work on anything in my life that's easy or that can be explained easily. I want to work on something that it's going to take unbelievable effort, great strategy, but more than anything else, sort of this supernatural, miraculous, come on, God, we can do this, and see great things happen. So that's the type of person I am. the good news is that they knew what they were getting when they hired me, because they did Mark Cole specifically did a super thorough job in all the interviews, the pre-interviews before I ever sat down with John at Pebble Beach. And so as a result of that, what I'm doing is I'm saying, what's the next big thing here in Equip as far as empower me and let's take on the world? And at that point, they didn't have the next big thing in Equip, but here's how insightful and how beautiful it worked out because of Mark Cole's leadership. I had gone to John and I said, hey, John, I think you're still missing one part of your kingdom. And that's the word that I use. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, hey, you've got this nonprofit, it's called Equip, but you're also the number one consultant for GMC. You're the number one consultant for Delta. You're the number one consultant for Microsoft. And you could list a whole bunch of other corporations because John's unbelievable, right? I said, you know, every one of those have corporate foundations, but not one has ever given even one penny to Equip. And he said, I don't think that's true. I said, no, some of their leaders have personally, but out of their corporate foundation, they haven't. He said, why is that? And I said, because Equip is a faith-based nonprofit. And a lot of corporates, including things like the Gates Foundation, they don't give funds primarily to faith-based philanthropies. Otherwise, everyone in their entire organization who went to church would be saying, excuse me, can you give money to my church or whatever else it is? And so most of the foundations, they've put something in there that would keep them from just giving all the money away to ministries if it's a corporate foundation. So John said, what should I do? And I said, if I were you, I'd start a new nonprofit. He said, what would you call it? I said, if it's me, I'd call it the John Maxwell Leadership Foundation, and start that and allow a giving mechanism. And I said, you'd only be able to use the funds towards what the core values were and what you set up in the original documents for that. I said, but take this, for example. You go over to Africa and you take the whole team over there and we do a training for some government in Africa. And while we're there, we can do a whole bunch of stuff under the Equip umbrella so that all of the transportation costs and things like that were handled through the John Maxwell Leadership Foundation. And it was all used accordingly because everybody there was involved in it. Yet now we can stay an extra few days on the Equip leadership. It would cost 1/10 the price. And he goes, well, how would you do that? And I said, well, you'd start the new family. He goes, well, can you do that? And I said, I could. And he said, great. And so all of a sudden, Mark Cole's challenging me for this next big thing that's out there that couldn't be done. And so they were really, really fantastic with me, always helping me find the right lane to stay in where I could go do something that hadn't been done before and trust God for big things.
That's incredible. That is absolutely brilliant too. I want to talk about, so let's rewind your life, 20 years. Talk about developing leaders. I know you have a passion for that.
I do.
What, in your opinion, what's the best way to grow and develop leaders in their 20s, 30s, 40s, so they can end up in positions like you're in and making the impact you are?
Yeah. Like you, and I'm sure like a ton of your listeners, I'll often have people come and say, hey, would you mentor me? I want to be mentored by you. And I have a standard answer, and that answer is no. And I say, no, the answer is no. And I said, but I might change my mind. And so I said, before I go any further, look me in the eyes. What is my answer? And they said, your answer is no. I said, that's correct. My answer is no. However, if I don't hear from you for at least 10 days, I don't want to hear from you from 10 days, but between 10 and 15 days from now, you send me a one-page piece of paper, an email, and it says, here's what mentoring means to me. Here's what I think the voids are in my life. Here's what I'm hoping would result as what would come to pass as a result of our mentoring time. And here's what I promise to bring to the table. And then here's what I would like you to provide. I will look at that. And then I'll take you out to Starbucks and we'll discuss it. And I'll even buy the Starbucks. And I said, so what's the answer? And they say no. And I said, but I might change my mind. What would it take? And then they run through that. And I say, yeah, that's good. I just want to look at you in the eye and tell you less than 1 out of 10 do I ever get something from. And 100% of those I end up mentoring. Now, I hope they don't all hear this podcast because they're like, hey, this is easy. But what mentoring means so many different things to different people. The average person out there, when they say, would you mentor me? What they're really saying is, will you give me free coaching? And the answer is no, I'm not going to do that. If I'm going to invest in somebody's life, I want to know that they're 10xing my investment in their own life. And then I will help guide that and love that. What I do is I pour courage into people. I am a courage freak. I've seen how courage has changed my life, and stepping out in courage and having a little bit of courage. And I remind people all the time, there is no such thing as a need for courage if there's not fear. When people go, well, I'm scared. Well, great. That means it's going to take courage. If you're not scared, there's no courage that's needed. And so there's all these different things in our life, changes that we'd like to make, becoming the type of person we'd want to be, but that would be hard. Yeah, it would be. It's going to take some courage. And so if I can be with people and help shape their lives and do that, I don't care if they're 20s or 30s or 40s or even people my age. I'm 57, I believe, right now. I don't know. I still think I'm in my 30s. The mirror would belie that, but my heart and mind, it's young, and I think it's probably because I get to hang out with so many young people. But I really would say my heart for that, and what I want to see is people who are willing to be overcomers in their own life and willing to put in the effort to get there.
You may have already answered this, but in those meetings, you say that you give people courage. I always like to ask leaders, what's the most valuable use of your time and resources when it comes to developing others? Mm-hmm. Is it primarily the encouragement and the courage that you pass on, or would you say other things?
Yeah, I think I heard recently, as the moment this podcast is being recorded, First Lady Barbara Bush is 92 years old and she's about to die. So she might have died earlier today, or she's going to die, certainly soon. And I was reading an article about her, and they said she is an unvarnished purveyor of truth. And I thought, you know what? As soon as my wife heard that, she's like, yeah, that's you. What I am is I just describe myself as I'm a truth teller. Wow. And most people don't like to hear the truth, but the real leaders want to hear the truth. They just don't have anyone who's going to have enough guts to say it. For example, if I'm meeting with somebody and they say, hey, I'd really like to do this, I'd say, why? And they give me the answers. And I'd say, have you thought about this? Yeah. I said, hey, you can do that if you want, but there's no future in that. I said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to prove yourself right. You're going to fight them. You're going to be all defensive, and you're going to prove that you were right. But in the end, it's not going to help you win friends or influence people. People are just going to say, yeah, he's the type of person who always has to be right. So instead of that, what's it going to take for you to overlook that or forgive that person, even though you know that you're the one who's wrong? And they're like, well, of course, once the truth is known, then I won't have to defend myself. But right now I have to. But I found that most of the time, defending ourselves, there's no end game in that. Because let's suppose somebody told me something bad about you. And then they went on and they told me something bad about somebody else. First thing I would do is I would go like, excuse me, why does this person feel like they have to share bad things about everybody? I would never think that about you. I would think that about the person telling me. Why are they about that? If you're really a bad person, that's going to be seen in your action. All I have to do is look at who you are and who you've had on your podcast, and at your young age to be as consistent as you have been. It's just really amazing. So I think, no. Anyone who's going to say something bad about someone like you, they're going to have to deal with me, and better be careful because I'm an unvarnished purveyor of truth.
I love that. And if someone's listening to this, like you said, you might get a lot of emails with one-pagers because people want to spend time with you. But you recently developed an organization called Leader Tribe, and people can actually access you and get your content on a consistent basis. Can you talk about Leader Tribe, what it is, why you created it, and how it'll add value to my listeners?
Yeah, so Leader Tribe, what I did is I started blogging, but with my blogs, I try to keep it real for sure, but if you listen to my podcast, I have this cool little intro music, and I'm old school, so it's got a little wiki. We're having fun with this thing. And it says, hey, this is relevant, researched, and ready for action. Apply these and you will grow. Here's your daily dose of growth with Dr. Rob McCleland. And yay, okay. And then I come on, do some stupid podcast. No, I'm just kidding. It's not. Everything I do, I want to be involved in the research. Okay, that's just who I am. So what happens is, there's so much great research out there, and it's on Stanford University site or on Wharton site or on University of Michigan. Here's the problem. It's recorded in a bunch of academic mumbo jumbo. Now, God's given me the kind of mind, and I have a PhD, and I finished at the top of my class, and I understand all of that stuff. And as I read it, I say, why do they try to sound so smart? Why can't you just put the cookies on the lowest shelf and make this helpful to people? So what I do is I take all of that type of research, and I say, what did they really learn, and how can it be applied in a growing leader's life? And then I do a 7 to 9 minute podcast every day on that. So I started Leader Tribe about a year and a half ago, just doing it in blog form and then in some videos, because I have a face for radio. However, I get excited and my energy comes across in video. So I go ahead and I did these videos. I stopped doing that at about the beginning of this year to get the podcast launched. And now within about 2 weeks, I'm going to go back to both of those. So Leader Tribe is something that you can do every single day. It's called Your Daily Dose of Growth, where there's a fun little research study. You get one application point and you start to apply it. That kind of supplements a lot of the business. I consult with some of the leading countries in the United States, specifically with their C-suite and helping them get organizational alignment at the top. And I'm expensive, but I look the CFO in the eye and I say, if what you're paying me to do, if I don't bring you at least 3 times as much value as what you've paid me, then I beg you to let me give you your money back. And that's exactly how I say it. I beg you. Why? Because I'm not in this to make money. I'm in this to add value. Well, Leader Tribe's all about adding value. Plus, I will monetize it because I still have this. I've started leadertribe.org, and that's the nonprofit side. I want to take leadership principles to millions and millions and millions of 15 to 25-year-olds in third world countries who could never pay for it. And doing that by developing a certain kind of app and a daily, just think about this. About 40% of the world will never read it beyond a 4th or 5th grade level. Okay, they're never going to buy a John Maxwell book. They're never going to buy Kouzes and Posner, The Truth About Leadership, which is one of my favorite leadership books of all time. Where are they going to learn leadership? Well, there are more cell phones in the world today than there are toothbrushes by far. 99% of the world's population now lives within range of a cell tower. Anywhere in the world you go into some little village, they don't have any food, they don't have their teeth, but they all are walking around with their little cell phones. It's unbelievable. That's just the world we live in today. And so I thought they're going to learn leadership one thumb at a time if somebody will bring it to them because they're not able to pay for it. And so that's why I started the nonprofit. And what I want to do, I want to be in heaven someday and have millions and millions of people go like, oh, you're the dude who, and it's not going to be me. It's not going to be me talking. It's just going to be really good leadership principles put at their level and to help them do good for the world.
That's fantastic. And I will include links to all of that in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and want to connect, you can just visit the show notes and connect with Rob there. With the time that we have left, I want to dive into what I call the lightning round, just a bunch of fun questions that I like to ask leaders.
Bring it.
Let's just dive right in. What is one belief or behavior that's changed your life?
I think it is working in spurts instead of working long-term. So the whole idea of the tomato timer and saying, if I have 1 hour to work, I'm going to spend about 5 minutes preparing for that work, 40 minutes working at it as hard as I possibly can. No interruptions, no cell phones, no nothing. Focus time. And then I'm going to rest for the next 15 minutes or do something crazy and fun. And then I'm going to spend the next hour the same way. If you do that for 2 hours, you'll get done more than the average person will in 8 hours. And it's all based in science and research.
Do you plan your days out daily, weekly, monthly? What does your calendar look like?
Nightly. So basically every night you're going to win tomorrow tonight. And so tonight is when I'm going to spend, and it only takes at this point about 5 minutes, but to make sure I have my day ready to go tomorrow. Most people work on what I call OPA, other people's agendas. Your email, that's other people's agendas. Every time you look at your email, you feel like, oh, I'm busy and I'm responding and I'm doing my work. No, you're not. You're doing something for somebody else. What is it that you have to get done? What is it that your agenda, what's going to make you a champion person? And if you can have some of those sprints that I just talked about, working in focus times, and do that before you ever check your email. My hero, and this is a guy named James Clear, jamesclear.com. He's got 500,000 people reading his letter now. He's awesome. And what James Clear, he doesn't even look at his phone or email until noon every day. Okay, he's my hero. I'm not there. I bow down to him. But someday I'm going to hope to be there because I want to be a productive person who does good for the world.
If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
It would say the number one job of a leader is to accurately define reality. And that's from the guy who used to be CEO of Herman Miller. Basically, what he's saying is, if we're going to lead some situation, you get into a room with leaders and they say, we're going to take this hill, we're going to launch these new products. They have all these huge, grandiose visions. And it's like, excuse me, you can't even show up for a meeting on time. What are you talking about? And so what we have to do is accurately define reality. Where are we right now? Where are we really? Not where we want to be, but where are we really? And that is usually so depressing. But when everybody can agree this is where we are, now as you begin to take the future and take it by storm, you can see progress and it keeps people motivated. Number one job of a leader is to accurately define reality.
It sounds like you're pretty good at that. I think
my team would think so.
Yeah. What's the best purchase you've made in the last year for $100 or less?
You know what? When I saw that question, I thought, I'm not sure, probably some book, but for about $130, it was AirPods.
You got to be kidding me. I'm not exaggerating. I threw that question in probably 6 months ago.
Uh-huh.
I don't think I've had one response that wasn't AirPods.
Are you kidding?
Oh, no.
Okay, so here's what you just learned. If you're listening to this podcast and you see these things, you think, no, don't you lose them? They don't really. They are unbelievable. They're game changers, and so go get AirPods.
What are the top 2 or 3 books that you find yourself giving away most often?
Giving away most often, one of mine giving away is John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, but not just the book. It's the old, really cool leather version of it, because I got a huge employee discount when I worked for him, so I bought a ton of them. So I give that one away a lot. But more, apart from just on the gift-giving side, Patrick Lencioni's The Advantage, where he took the 5 dysfunctions of a team, death by meeting, getting naked, and all of those books and put them into one. It's the first book he did that's nonfiction. By far the best organizational leadership book in the history of the world. I give that one away often. And also The Truth About Leadership, which I referenced earlier. Really cool story on how that book even came to pass that we can talk about it at a different time.
Sure. Other than your own, what are the top 1 or 2 podcasts that you listen to on a consistent basis?
Yeah, I used to listen to Michael Hyatt's more. He's gone a little more NPR. The information is better than ever, but I just don't like that style. As you can tell from my personality, you know what? If I have a podcast and I can put it on 2X with his new style and listen really fast, then that would be a little better. But I am just such a huge Michael Hyatt fan. I think he's by far the best blogger on the internet. Wonderful guy. I've been with him 4 or 5 times in a small group setting, and he's the real deal. So anything that he does is great. I also listen to Tim Ferriss. I get a little dose of reality with him. Comes from a totally different worldview, but I love how vulnerable he is. And I think if all leaders could be that vulnerable, we'd all have followings like he had.
Yeah. What do you wish people knew about your journey that they may not know after listening to you?
I think that you sound like, wow, Rob's got a big personality and he's all excited and he goes on with life. That was born out of a ton of pain and brokenness. And so what I am now is this is who I am when I get to be exactly who God made me to be. But this person was hidden under a whole lot of layers of hurt and pain and things that needed to be forgiven and people I needed to forgive. Last week on my podcast, it was Forgiveness Week, Monday through Friday podcast. Guess what? Every single one of them came from either Harvard or Stanford or Wharton. Harvard dedicated an entire episode or an entire month of its Harvard Business Review to forgiveness. Why? Because when you have, if you don't have forgiveness, it's like you've drank poison to try to punish somebody else. And so that's what they say in their magazine. And so we went all through that and seeing that being uncovered in my life and finally getting that poison out of my system. Now I get to be the happy, crazy person that I am.
What's the greatest challenge in your life right now when it comes to leadership?
Right now, I think it is making sure that I am manifesting the kind of life that is taking advantage of the very best opportunities, because I don't lack for opportunities. In my life, I have the most blessed life that I'm aware of. I live in the house I want to. If you offered me, here's a 30-bedroom mansion up on a hill, we'd love to give it to you. And I said, okay, do I have to live in it or could I sell it? And they go, no, you have to live in it. I'm like, yeah, no, thanks. We love our house. We built a kitchen and put a house around it. It's awesome. I love my wife. I love my garage. I love the people that I get to interact with in life and the opportunities I have. I was, I don't want to sound prideful, but probably 2.5 months ago, given an opportunity to take a look at a very high-level CEO position here in Atlanta. Wouldn't have even had to move. And I wrote them a very quick 2-sentence email saying, I'm in the enviable position of having everything I want exactly how I want it. And so I pray that you'll find the right person, but it's not me. And so I don't want more money. What I want to do is make my life count investing, want it to be significant because I've loved and invested in other people.
Just out of curiosity to follow up on that, what's the price you've had to pay to get there? Because I'm sure, people my age listening to that would say, wow, well, if I could be there when I'm 56 or 57, that'd be a good day. What advice do you have for young people when it comes to paying that price?
Yeah, great question. First of all, I don't have most people when they think in those terms, they want more money. It's not like I've done most of my service within the nonprofit. It's not like we have a ton of money, but man, are we happy? And I'd sure hate to, more millionaires per capita commit suicide than people on welfare. Money does not make you happy. And so having realized that was good. So the advice I'd give somebody that is more your age is say, figure out how you're wired up. That it's when you're in your sweet spot. If you're driving home from work one day and you're holding on to the steering wheel with your left hand, with your right hand, you're going like, see, that's what I'm talking about. That was an awesome day. If I could do that, where you were fully alive, it was the best day you ever had. What did you do that day? Okay, now build a life around doing that. And because going back to the Eldridge quote from a long time ago, hey, what the world, don't ask what does the world need, ask what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive.
When you get to spend time with great leaders, I'm just curious, do you have one or two go-to questions that no matter what, you ask them those questions?
I do. What I did recently, and when I say recently, it's within the last 4 days, is I thought about that question. And so I've just developed for the first time ever 7 excellent questions for engaging conversations that I'm just giving away right now. And it's because I think people, they're scared to go up and meet people. They don't know what question to ask and what's the all-important follow-up question. And so as of today, I think it's working that you can text a number and then it will be sent to you. And so if you text the word Leader Tribe, all one word, Leader Tribe, to 44222, then you get in that little string and it will send you those 7 engaging questions. I have a list of 50 questions, but I thought if I did that, it would overwhelm people. So I took the top 7.
Can you share one with us?
Yeah, I can. Let's say I've just met you, and so everybody else is going to come up to you and go like, oh, hey, I really love your work. I'm a big fan. And you're going, hey, thanks, appreciate it. Somebody get me out of here, right? So I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
So I want to come up and go, hey, you know what? Total pleasure to meet you. And as I've read your stuff, I was thinking one thing. Someone like you, you've got to knock a lot of stuff off your bucket list. But what are 1 or 2 things that are still on there? Or what's one that you've knocked off most? Well, all of a sudden they're going to go like, okay, 1,000 people have come up to me. Nobody's asked me that question. Now they have to stop and think a little bit. And no matter what they say, I'm going to be following up on it.
Yeah.
And usually they're going to say, what about you? What about your bucket list? And I'm going to say, obviously it's to play Augusta. And one of these days, somebody's going to know. Questions like that, They engage people, they open up, and all of a sudden they lean towards you instead of leaning away from you.
So talk to all the fanboys that you were talking about. And I would say that a couple of years ago, I was one. Again, when I started interviewing leaders like you, I remember getting so nervous. And I'm a lot more comfortable today than I was then. Although if I had interviewed John Maxwell, that's the one where I think I would just freeze and fall out of my chair. But talk about the courage it takes to actually go up. And what advice would you have to not be that guy that's like, hi, can I have your autograph or a picture? I mean, I maybe just ask them engaging questions, but how do you have that courage?
Yeah, so tomorrow is Wednesday, the 16th or 17th of April. And my podcast tomorrow is about that. I've already recorded it. It's slotted. And it's basically, it's listener question week. I had a guy named Jason from Chicago say, hey, when I have to go talk to the people who are at the VP level or in the C-suite, I kind of freeze up and I get nervous. What can I do? And the best research that's out there says if you're thinking of yourself in that scenario as one of the actors, then you tend to feel all the emotions. But instead, if you'll step back and pretend you were an observer and you saw you going into that person's office or going up and meeting John Maxwell, and if you saw you acting all weird and, oh, it's so nice to meet you, I'm freezing, what would you tell that person? You'd say, hey, he's just a person. He's awesome, but Go talk to them. And so begin to look at this as an observer, an outsider, and realize, hey, that interaction is going to take place over about 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Don't let it ruin 48 hours ahead of time because you're so nervous about it. Think, in that 30 seconds to 2 minutes, what do I have to bring to the table? And if you can get into that mindset, it's going to go great for you.
That's so good. If you could go back and have coffee with your 20-year-old self, what would you tell them?
I would tell them there's a lot of things you're going to want to do in life to make yourself look better, and to misrepresent yourself as better than you are. And you need to avoid that temptation. That in the end, what you're trying to do, let's suppose I succeeded. Let's suppose I'm with you and I wanted to impress you, and I pull out the best case Rob scenario with no sin, no faults. And all of a sudden you're like, I really like that person. Well, now I'm scared. Why? Because as soon as you find out the real me, now I got to, what if I just present the real me right in the beginning? Then I don't have to be scared. And guess what? What I have found over and over and over again at all levels, all the way up to leaders of nations, is that if you'll go in and be vulnerable, they go, okay, this guy's real, we can talk. Because they have all these people all day long trying to make themselves look good. And so stop trying to make yourself look good. Instead, concentrate on adding value to other people.
So on the other end of life, when you get to the end of your life, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want your kids to say about you at your funeral?
Yeah, I really, John does the best ever in this. He has a book called Today Matters, and you can get the Cliff Notes. As a matter of fact, I think I have a executive book summary on that I can make available to you for your listeners here.
That'd be great.
But he said, and he lives by this, that he wants the people who are closest to him to have the most respect for him. And so if he tells his family, hey, I'm going to take you to Disneyland, but now all of a sudden the president of the United States calls him up and says, hey, I want you to go on TV with me and do something great. And here's the only day we can do it. John will look at that and say, yeah, I'm sorry, I can't. I made a commitment to my family. Because he says the people who are closest to me, if they respect me the most, then I'm going to have a good life. And so he has some summary on that, on how he got to that place. Certainly there's that in my life, in that my daughter is 24 as of a couple of days ago. Her dad has never lied to her. And so I want her to have that confidence that it actually saved me some money on a car once. I'll tell you a 30-second version of the story. The car salesman says, okay, here's our final offer. I said, I'm sorry, that's not meeting mine. Here's mine. If you give me this amount, I will purchase that car. It happened to be a Lexus from you today. And the guy says, are you trying to tell me, Dr. McCleland, that you would walk away from this great deal for just this little amount of money? That's the difference. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll have my daughter answer that question. And she said, sir, my dad doesn't lie. And so if he told you something, I would believe it, because he tells me, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Everything else is of evil. And so he's not going to change his mind, but that's just my opinion. So she's a little girl. She said that.
That's amazing.
He's blown away, turns back to me and says, okay, I'll meet your price. And we shook hands and I bought a car.
Wow.
So it works for you in the long run.
Yeah. Anything else you want to leave leaders with today? I'll just leave it open-ended.
Yeah. You know what? I'm thinking if I heard a podcast with somebody like me and I'd go, who is this guy? A, he needs to stop having so much coffee. And, and B, how does that really work itself out? And the number one thing I tell people is when we try to increase our leadership capacity or start to grow as leaders, we take steps that are way, way, way too big. It always has to go back to baby steps. If you can take 1-inch step today, that is better than taking a 3-foot leap once or twice a year going to a conference. Take a 1-inch step, the next day a 1-inch step, the next day a 1-inch step. What happens if you'll change, even in very small increments, it rewires your brain to say, oh, I can change. It's neuroplasticity. The Joseph Grinny, probably the most highly paid executive coach out there, he meets with these top CEOs. He has them go home and floss one tooth. That's it. Floss one tooth. And they're like, what are you talking about? He goes, you have to promise me you'll floss that same one tooth every week. Okay, well, now they're flossing it. The next week, he's like, okay, get the one next to it. Get the one, because if you're doing something that small, your brain won't fight you. It doesn't think you're trying to build a habit. It won't fight you. So all of a sudden, you'll get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better every day. And pretty soon, people are going like, what's up with your life? You're changing. And it's because you've done a little bit every day so small that people won't fight you on it. And I would tell leaders out there, you listen to this and you think, well, I want to be like this, or I want to have those opportunities. Great. Pick one very, very small thing and do it all week long, and then be proud of yourself when you get it done.
Rob, this was so good. Thank you so much for taking time to invest me and everyone that will listen to this, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again someday.
I would look forward to it. It's great to grow our friendship, and any way I can serve you or your listeners, just let me know.
Great, thanks. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to our interview with Rob. I hope that you enjoyed it. You can find all of the key takeaways and links to everything we discussed and ways to connect with Rob in the show notes at l3leadership.org/episode 195. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean the world to me if you would share this on social media, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a rating and review on iTunes. It really does make a difference and helps us grow our audience, so thank you for that. And thanks for being a listener. I want to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers, as well. They're a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny, and my wife, Laura, and I got our wedding and engagement rings through Henny Jewelers, and we just think they're an incredible company. Not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. In fact, John gave Laura and I a book, and they give every engaged couple a book to help them prepare for marriage, and we just love that. And so if you're in need of a good jeweler, check out hennyjewelers.com. You can also stay in touch with everything we're doing here at L3 Leadership by simply signing up for our email list at l3leadership.org. It's the best way to stay up to date with everything we're doing. And as always, I like to end with a quote, and I will quote Jim Rohn today. He said this, he said, "You can't achieve beyond the level of your development. You don't achieve goals, you grow into them." Love it. Thank you for listening and being a part of L3 Leadership. Laura and I appreciate you so much, and I will talk to you next episode.